"Dad, if I don't make it through tonight, don't let him get away with it." That's what my daughter breathed into the phone before the line dissolved into the sound of something heavy hitting a wall. I'm 69 years old, and I have heard a lot of terrible sounds in my life, but nothing has ever moved through me the way that whisper did. 11 minutes later, I had her husband pinned to his own kitchen tile, and 2 sheriff's deputies were coming through the front door with their hands on their weapons. He was screaming that I'd attacked him. But the deputies weren't looking at him. They were looking at me, and I knew exactly why. I want to be honest with you before I go any further. I almost didn't tell this story to anyone, because for most of my life I believed the kindest thing a man like me could do was stay quiet. I'm not sure that was wisdom. I think now it might have been hiding. So let me start from the part nobody in my family saw coming, least of all the man on that floor. His name was Brandon Keller. He was 38, tall, with a jaw he was proud of, and a haircut that cost more than my monthly fuel bill. He sold high-end boats down on the marina in town, and walked through every door like the room had been waiting all day just for him to arrive. When he married my daughter, I tried to like him. I need you to understand that I really tried. Because after I lost my wife Helen to a stroke 6 winters ago, my daughter Megan was the only family I had left in the world. So when she came home glowing, laughing the way she used to laugh as a girl, I swallowed 100 small things that bothered me. The bragging, the third drink, the way he talked over her like her sentences were speed bumps. I told myself every young marriage has rough water. Maybe that was my first mistake. It would not be my last. My name is Walter Brandt. I live in Astoria, Oregon, a fishing town wedged between the river and the rain, where the fog rolls in off the Columbia, and everybody knows everybody's boat by name. To the people here, I'm just the old man in the gray pickup with the brown dog named Scout. They see me buying salmon down at the dock. They see me fixing outboard motors for half the houses on my street for free. They see me alone at the counter of the Pig and Pancake every Friday with a black coffee and a folded newspaper. That's all they see. And the truth is, I liked it that way. I spent 27 years in naval special warfare. By the time I came home for good, I'd had enough noise, enough flag-draped boxes, enough adrenaline to last 4 lifetimes. Quiet became the most expensive thing I owned. I thought I'd finally bought some peace. I was wrong about the peace. The first time I felt the floor shift under Megan's marriage was at a Thanksgiving 2 years back. My daughter learned to cook standing on a stool beside her mother, and she'd kept every one of Helen's recipes in a little tin box. That year she let the bird go a few minutes long. Nothing tragic. A little dry at the edges, that's all. Brandon cut one slice, set down the knife, and announced to the whole table, "Well, sweetheart, good thing you've got the looks, because the kitchen sure isn't your battlefield." Everybody laughed. Megan laughed too, but I watched her shoulders climb up toward her ears before the joke even finished landing the way a body braces when it has braced before. You spend enough years reading micro-expressions on people who want to kill you, and you never stop reading the small ones. The small ones never lie. I started watching after that. At Christmas he mocked the sweater she'd picked out. At a barbecue he snapped at her for forgetting the limes. At every dinner he corrected her stories. "That's not how it happened. You always exaggerate. Megan's hopeless with details. Tiny cuts. 1,000 tiny cuts." And every single time she smiled through it. That smile scared me more than a raised fist ever could. If you've ever watched someone you love slowly apologize for taking up space in their own life, if you've watched them get smaller at a dinner table while everyone pretends not to notice, then you already know the pleasant, particular kind of helplessness I'm describing. You don't have proof. You just have a feeling in your gut that something is dying right in front of you, and nobody wants to be the one who says it out loud. One evening late that summer I had them over for supper. Just burgers and corn and a tub of store potato salad. A couple neighbors drifted by too. Brandon had been drinking before he arrived. I could smell the bourbon hiding under his cologne. He leaned against my fence watching me work the grill and said, loud enough for the yard, "You know, Walt, you're the quietest old man I've ever met." I smiled. That meant to be an insult? Nah, just saying. Most ex-military guys won't shut up about it. You act like it never happened. What'd you even do stamp paperwork? The neighbors laughed, a little uncomfortable. I flipped a burger. Something like that. He pointed his beer at me. See, Megan acts like you're some kind of secret legend. Personally, I think most of those war stories are about 90% exaggeration. The yard went quiet. I just flipped another burger. No anger. Nothing at all. And that the nothing drove him crazy. Men like Brandon eat reactions. Starve one, and he feels like a ghost. A few minutes later, Megan came inside to help me carry plates. The second we were alone, she said very softly, "I'm sorry." And I saw it. A bruise on her wrist, half buried under makeup. My stomach turned to stone. What happened there? She yanked her sleeve down. "Nothing, Dad. Please. That word. Please." Not annoyed, not defensive, afraid, and just like that, I knew. Not every detail, but enough. That night, after everyone had gone, I sat alone in my garage with Scout asleep at my boots and the rain ticking on the metal roof. I opened a wooden chest I hadn't touched in years. Inside was another man's whole life. Photographs of people who never came home. Challenge coins, a folded flag, and one laminated card, soft at the corner's emergency communication codes. When Megan was 15, I taught her a few simple safety signals. Nothing dramatic, just precautions. The way other fathers teach you to check your mirrors. If she ever felt unsafe and couldn't speak freely, she could send certain plain phrases that meant something else. We treated it half like a joke back then. But I made her memorize one rule, and I made her say it back to me. If you ever send the real distress code, I come, immediately. No questions, no matter what. I can still see her rolling her eyes. Dad, you watch way too many movies. Maybe I did. Or maybe fathers just know the shape of the world a little better than their daughters wish they did. Around midnight, my phone lit up on the workbench. A text from Megan. "Hey Dad, can you send me Mom's clam chowder recipe?" And under it, 3 digits, 407. My blood turned to ice water. 407 meant one thing only. The thing we'd practiced. Danger now, call the police. I looked at that screen for maybe 2 seconds. And then 27 years woke up inside my bones all at once, not loud, not shaking, but cold and clear and terribly calm. I stood up slowly. I walked to the safe and opened it. Not because I wanted to hurt anybody. Because my child was afraid. And there is nothing on this earth more dangerous than an old man whose child is afraid. Here's something I've learned about fear that young people never believe me about. Young men think fear is loud, the pounding heart, the shaking hands. But the real fear, the kind that arrives when someone you love might be dying, doesn't shout. It goes quiet. It goes cold. It gets efficient. That's exactly how I felt driving the dark river road toward their house, wipers shoving sheets of rain off the glass, my old truck rattling over every pothole while I barely felt the road. I had dispatch on the speaker. The young woman's voice was tight. "Sir, can you describe the situation?" "Possible domestic assault in progress," I said. "Adult female inside the home. Adult male, intoxicated. Are weapons involved?" "Unknown." "Sir, are you approaching the residence right now?" I watched the rain swallow the road ahead. "Yes." "Please wait for our officers." "No, ma'am," I said quietly. "I won't be doing that." There was a pause. Then, carefully. "Sir, are you armed?" "Yes." "It's locked in the vehicle." I don't intend to use it, and that part was true. People get men like me wrong. They picture us hungry for violence. Most of us spend the back half of our lives doing everything we can to never touch it again. Their place sat at the edge of one of those half-built subdivisions where the construction stopped during hard times and never started back up. Dark houses, wet pavement, not a soul moving. The downstairs lights were all blazing. I heard him before I was even out of the truck. I crossed the yard quietly. Age changes the way a man moves. My knees ache in the cold and my shoulder pops when I reach too high. But the important things don't leave you. Balance, timing, the habit of staying silent. I came up to the front window, and every fear I'd carried for 2 years turned solid. Megan was backed against the kitchen counter, crying, a thread of blood at her lip. Brandon stood inches from her face. Roaring, broken glass scattered across the floor between them. He grabbed her arm hard enough to make her stumble, and something inside me went perfectly still. Not angry. That always surprises people. I wasn't angry yet. Anger is hot. Anger is for amateurs. This was something older and colder than anger. This was the thing you feel watching a wolf walk toward a child. I went around to the side gate. The patio door was open a few inches, the curtain breathing in the wind. Inside, Brandon was shouting, "You think your old man's gonna come save you?" Megan whispered, "Please, please stop." Then he shoved her shoulder, not enough to drop her, just enough to terrify her. That was enough for me. I'll be honest with you, here at the part where it mattered most. If that had been me at 30, the man would have left that kitchen on a stretcher, and I would have called it justice. But 30 years had taught me something. 30 had never known that the loudest answer is almost never the one that protects the people you love. So I didn't kick the door. I didn't shout. I just walked in. The old floorboards barely whispered under my boots. Brandon didn't even notice me until Megan's eyes shot past his shoulder and went wide. "Dad?" He turned around, and God help him, he smiled. "Well, look who it is," he slurred. "Captain America." I kept walking, slow and even. "Step away from her," he scoffed. "Or what?" I said it again, the same flat way. "Step away from my daughter." Megan's breath was coming in little panicked gulps. Brandon threw his arms wide, performing for an audience that wasn't there. "Oh no, everybody," the old man's serious. Then he jabbed a finger at me. "You want to know your problem, Walt? Everybody treats you like some wise old hero. But you're just a washed-up nobody hiding in a garage." I didn't answer. People always think violence announces itself. Real danger almost never does. He took 2 hard steps toward me. That was his mistake. The instant his right shoulder dropped, the old training simply took the wheel. One motion, that's all it was. I caught his arm, turned in behind him, and put him face down on the kitchen floor before he ever finished cocking his fist. His curse came out in a burst of bourbon breath. I had his wrist pinned up behind his back firm, controlled, nowhere near the edge of breaking it, just enough to own him completely. He thrashed under me, stunned. "What, how?" "Stop resisting," I said, calm as Sunday. Megan stood frozen by the counter, both hands pressed to her mouth. Brandon bucked again. I shifted the pressure a hair. He gasped. "Pain compliance. Precise. Temporary. Old skills." "You're hurting me," he spat. "No," I said. "You're restrained. There's a difference." That made him angrier than the floor did. The whole thing lasted maybe 30 seconds before red and blue light came washing across the living room walls. 2 deputies came through the door fast, weapons up. "Sheriff's office." I let go of one of his hands and raised mine slowly. "Victims secure. Suspects restrained." And here's the moment I'll never forget. Both deputies froze for half a heartbeat. The younger one kept his sights on Brandon. But the older one looked at me, and I watched it happen behind his eyes, not recognition of my face, recognition of how. The calm breathing. The way I'd watched the doors. The restraint that controlled without injuring, he knew. The way one of us always knows another. If you have ever spent years being underestimated, being looked straight through like you were furniture, then you understand what that one look was worth to me. He didn't say a word about it. He didn't have to. Sometimes being seen by the right person for half a second is worth more than a lifetime of applause from the wrong ones. "Sir," the older deputy said, "can you stand up nice and slow for me?" I nodded and rose off him. The second the weight left, Brandon rolled over, howling. "This psycho attacked me." The deputy didn't even glance at him. He looked at my daughter. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" Megan's lip trembled. "Yes." That single word turned the whole room. The younger deputy had Brandon in handcuffs, and was reading him his rights over the top of his furious shouting. "You can't arrest me. He attacked me first. This is insane." Nobody listened. And then Megan came apart. Not delicate crying. The real thing, years of held-down fear pouring out of her all at once, her whole body shaking with it. I pulled the throw blanket off the back of a chair and wrapped it around her shoulders, the exact same way I used to during thunderstorms when she was 6. "It's okay," I whispered. "You're safe now." She grabbed onto me and held on, and that nearly finished me. Because fathers tell themselves they'll always recognize their child's suffering the moment it starts. But sometimes it grows so slow and so quiet, right inside your own family, and you miss it. I missed it. The older deputy stepped close once the EMTs arrived. Low voice, "You serve?" I nodded. "Retired Navy." His eyes dropped for a second to the spot where I'd held Brandon, then came back to me. "Well, you handled that like a professional." It almost made me laugh. Professional. As if it were just another operation. But it wasn't. It was my daughter. And standing in that wrecked kitchen, after all the silence, one thought hit me harder than anything had in years. I should have come sooner. The strangest thing about a house after violence is the silence that comes next. Not a peaceful quiet, a heavy one, the kind that soaks into the furniture and the walls like smoke after a fire. Megan came home with me. The first few days, neither of us talked much. She slept in her old room, the one with the sun-faded horse posters she'd taped up at 13, under the quilt Helen had sewn. I never had the heart to change it after she moved out. Maybe some part of me always hoped she'd come home. Just not like this. The first morning, I was up before the sun out of old habit, making coffee while the rain ticked on the window, and Scout snored by the back door. Megan came down in one of my old wool sweaters. Her lip looked worse in daylight purple, swollen, a small split at the corner. Seeing it pulled my chest tight all over again. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Sorry," she whispered. "For what?" "For all of this." And that one answer told me everything about how long she'd been trapped. Victims learn to apologize for surviving. I sat down across from her. "You don't owe me an apology, honey." Her eyes filled. She looked away fast. "I should have left him a long time ago." I took a slow breath. "Maybe." Her shoulders sank. "But fear keeps people in bad places way longer than they should stay." We sat in it a while. Then she said the thing that broke me clean in half. "I didn't want you to think I'd failed. I'm telling you at 69. After war and funerals and everything else this life can throw, certain sentences still know exactly how to slide between your ribs." I stared into my coffee, because here's the part that's hard to admit. Some of that was my fault. I was not an easy father after Helen died. That's the thing men of my generation don't like to say out loud. We were raised to treat grief like a weakness. You work through the pain, you keep your mouth shut, you keep moving. So that's what I did. I fixed engines. I cleaned gutters that didn't need cleaning. I stayed busy enough that I never had to sit still long enough to feel how alone I was. Megan was in her 20s then, heartbroken, still needing her dad. And I disappeared into myself. Not cruelly, just quietly. And children, even grown ones, feel that distance more than we ever let ourselves believe. A few days later, she finally started to talk, really talk. We sat on the back porch watching the fog drift over the slough behind my place, while Scout chased something invisible through the wet grass. She wrapped both hands around a mug of tea. "He wasn't always like that," she said. I stayed quiet. At first he was charming, funny. He made me feel protected. "That's usually how it starts," I said. She nodded. "After the wedding, little things changed." "Like what?" She looked out at the trees. "He started picking at my friends, then my clothes, then the way I talked." I listened. That's another thing age teaches you. Sometimes people don't need you to fix it. They need room to finally say the truth out loud. If supper was late, he'd get cold. If I disagreed with him in front of people, I'd pay for it after. "What kind of paying?" She swallowed. Silence, first, then, her voice shrank, then yelling. I already knew the next part. "The first time he put his hands on me," he cried after. "Said he was stressed. Said it would never happen again." I closed my eyes. The oldest cycle there is. Apology, excuse, a little kindness, then it climbs. I kept thinking if I just got calmer, better, things would go back to how they were. "That's not how men like Brandon work, sweetheart." "I know that now," she said. I didn't then. And the thing breaking her voice wasn't only fear. It was shame. Because shame traps people almost as hard as fear does, especially good people, especially the ones raised to keep up appearances. "I was so ashamed everyone would think I picked the wrong man," she whispered. "Everybody picks wrong sometimes." She shook her head. "Mom didn't." And that one landed somewhere deep. Because Helen had been warm where I was cold, gentle where I was hard. Megan got her mother's softness. And maybe that softness is exactly what made her a target for a man who mistook kindness for weakness he could stand on. A few days after that, a detective came by Detective Ramos, mid-40s, no nonsense, kind in a no-time-to-waste sort of way. She sat at my kitchen table going through paperwork while Megan twisted a tissue to shreds in her lap. "We went through his phone and his laptop," Ramos said. "There's a pattern here that supports ongoing abuse." Megan looked down. Then, very quietly, "There's more." Ramos raised an eyebrow. Megan reached into her bag and set a small flash drive on the table. I started recording the arguments. Months ago, the room went still. Ramos plugged it in. The first clip was 40 seconds long. 40 seconds was plenty. Brandon screaming, glass breaking, Megan crying, and then one sentence from him turned my blood to frost. If your father ever sticks his nose in, I'll make sure he regrets it. Ramos slid the headphones off slow. Well, she said, that's going to help your case quite a bit. Megan flinched. I know recording him was wrong. Ramos shook her head right away. No, honey, surviving isn't wrong. And I watched that sentence do something to my daughter that no lawyer's argument could. Sometimes people just need permission to stop blaming themselves. That night, I sat alone in the garage in the dark a long while. The combat memories had been coming back harder since the arrest. That's how it works. You spend decades bolting doors shut inside your head, and then one emotional shock throws every one of them open at once. I remembered young men bleeding on the far side of the world. I remembered standing on porches telling mothers their sons weren't coming home. I remembered staying detached on purpose, because staying detached is how you survive. And I wondered sitting there, if I'd done the very same thing as a father, compartmentalized my own daughter. Locked her behind a door so I wouldn't have to feel. Megan found me there. Can't sleep either? She asked. I shook my head. We listened to the rain. Then she surprised me. Dad, were you ever scared? Over there? Nobody had asked me that in years. I gave a tired smile. All the time. Her eyes went wide. But your fear doesn't go away because you're trained, I said. It just stops getting a vote. What matters is what you do while you're still afraid. She looked at her hands a long moment. I was afraid every day with him. I reached over and took her hand. You don't have to live afraid anymore. And for the first time since she was a little girl, my daughter leaned her head on my shoulder and cried herself to sleep. I never thought I'd put the dress uniform on again. The last time was at Helen's funeral, and I'd only worn the jacket because she loved seeing me in it. Said it reminded her that under all my quiet, there was still a man who once stood for something. After she died, I packed it into the attic and figured it would stay there until they buried me in it. But life has a way of reopening old closets. Brandon's hearing came in late October. Gray sky, cold rain, the kind of damp morning that gets into the bones. Megan sat beside me in the courthouse hall, holding a paper cup with both hands. She looked healthier than she had in years, and still so fragile in certain moments. Healing isn't a straight line. Some mornings she smiled. Some mornings she barely came out of the guest room. Inside the courtroom, Brandon looked smaller, not in his body. Somewhere under it. His good suits were gone. His hair was unwashed. Weeks in county had hollowed his eyes. His parents sat behind him looking worn down to nothing. And I'll be honest, I felt for them. No parent raises a boy hoping he'll grow into this. His lawyer stood up and immediately started painting Brandon as the real victim. A stressed husband, a hard-working provider, a man going through a rough patch. Then he turned toward me and called me a dangerous old man who'd used excessive force outside the law. I sat perfectly still. The prosecutor already looked bored, because evidence doesn't care about a good performance. They put it all up: Megan's injuries, the photos, the recordings, the medical reports, the neighbors' statements. Then came the body cam footage. The whole room watched the deputies come into that kitchen. There I was on the screen, calm, controlled, holding Brandon down without ever throwing a punch, while he screamed drunken threats, and my daughter cried against the counter with blood on her lip. The defense's whole argument died right there on the monitor. But Brandon wasn't done humiliating himself. On the stand, he blamed every single thing but himself. The drinking, the stress, Megan being too emotional. Then he looked dead at me and sneered. He brainwashed her against me. And something in my daughter finally hardened. She stood up before the prosecutor even called her. Her voice shook at first, then found its footing. No, she said. The whole room turned. My father didn't brainwash me. She took a long breath. He saved my life. Dead silence. Then she described it, all the years of it. The insults, the isolation, the eggshells under her feet every single day. A juror in the back, an older woman, wiped her eyes. And then Megan said the thing that nearly took my knees out from under me. I stopped recognizing myself in that marriage. Because war wounds a soldier, but you can still see the soldier. Abuse erases a person while they're still standing in front of you. During the recess, the prosecutor found me by the vending machines. Special operations, weren't you? I gave a small nod. How'd you know? She smiled faintly. My father was a Marine. Then she hesitated. Your restraint that night probably saved this case. How do you mean? If you'd lost your temper and beaten him, The defense would have put you on trial instead. I nodded slowly. She was right. Revenge feels good for about a minute. Control protects people for years. It took me most of my life to understand the difference. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. Megan almost didn't go, but in the end she decided she needed to close the door herself. That morning I went up into the attic and unzipped the old garment bag. The fabric smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. As I pinned the medals back on, one at a time, the faces came back, friends laughing in the back of a helicopter, young men writing letters home, folded flags handed to weeping mothers. I held my silver star a long moment before I fixed it to my chest. Truthfully, I never cared much for medals. Medal can't bring anybody back. But they matter to people who weren't there. They remind folks that sacrifice existed before comfort got so easy. When I walked into that courtroom in full dress whites, every conversation in the room stopped. Even Megan stared. "You never wear that," she whispered. "I know. You look different." Maybe I did. Or maybe she was finally seeing the parts of me I'd spent a lifetime keeping in a chest in the garage. Brandon looked stunned when he saw me. And for the first time since I'd known him, real fear crossed his face. Not fear of getting hurt, but the slow, sick understanding that the quiet old man he'd mocked at a barbecue had been carrying weights he couldn't have held for a single week. The judge asked if I wanted to make a statement. I stood up slow, every joint reminding me of my age, and my voice came out steady. "I spent most of my life around violence," I said. "War, death, fear, loss." The room was silent, and the one thing all of it taught me is this. I looked over at Brandon. Strength has nothing to do with making people afraid of you. A few people lowered their eyes. Real strength is protecting the people who can't protect themselves. I paused. Especially your own family. Brandon was staring at the floor now, no arrogance left in him. And then I said something even I hadn't planned. "I don't hate Brandon." Megan looked at me, startled. "I hate what he became. I hate what he did. But hate just keeps doing damage, forever, if you keep feeding it." The judge listened closely. "I'm asking this court for accountability," I said, "not destruction. This is the part of the story I most need you to carry with you, so let me say it plainly. The mistake most people make is believing that the satisfying ending and the right ending are the same thing. They believed I'd walk into that courtroom and ask for the heaviest possible hammer. But what Megan understood, what I think most of the room finally understood, is that you can refuse to become the thing that hurt you, and that refusal is not weakness. It is the hardest strength there is. The sentence included real prison time, mandatory alcohol treatment, a long domestic violence program, and a permanent restraining order. As the deputies walked him out, Brandon stopped at the door and looked back at Megan. His eyes filled. Not the manipulative kind of tears this time, broken ones. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She didn't answer. She just held my hand while he disappeared through the doors. And for the first time in years, the fear was gone from her eyes. Winter went slow after the trial, the way everything goes slow when you heal at our age. By February, the hard rain had softened into gentler mornings, and the alders behind my place started showing green again. Megan found a little apartment downtown above a flower shop, run by an old widow named Carol Sunlight in the kitchen every morning. Safety gets beautiful after chaos. She went back to work part-time at the library. She'd been afraid people would whisper about the trial, but small towns surprise you. Most folks were gentle with her, the older women especially. People who've lived long enough to know pain when they see it. She told me once over coffee, "I thought everyone would judge me for staying." I stirred my cup. "Most people past 60 have survived something they're not proud of," I said. "It changes the way they look at other people." She stared into her tea. "I still feel embarrassed sometimes." I nodded. "That might stick around a while, but shame fades a whole lot faster in the light than it ever does in the dark." Helen used to say things like that. Funny how a marriage leaves pieces of someone living inside you long after they're gone. And me, I changed too. I'd isolated myself far more than I'd ever admitted, so I started showing up again. An old Marine named Dale talked me into Wednesday breakfast at the VFW. I dragged my feet at first, too many memories. But I went. Turns out old soldiers laugh more than anybody expects. We talked about grandkids and bad knees and outboard motors that won't turn over. Almost never about the war. Because the truth is, men like us Don't spend our last years reliving the worst days of our lives. Mostly, we spend them learning, finally, to love an ordinary, quiet morning. In the spring, Megan brought my grandson Eli over for Sunday supper. He's 10, skinny, curious, missing a front tooth. Brandon had barely let him visit me alone before all this. Said I was too old-fashioned. Now Eli tore through my backyard like he owned it. Children come back from tension faster than grown-ups, if you give them safety soon enough. We sat by the slough catching perch while the dragonflies skated over the water, and after a while he studied me and said, "Mom says you tackled Dad like a superhero." I almost choked. Your mother exaggerates. No, she doesn't. Then he went quiet, and finally, softly, he asked the question every child eventually asks. Why was Dad so mean? I looked out over the water a long moment. Sometimes people carry anger they never learned how to put down. Did he hate Mom? No, I said honestly. That's the saddest part. Eli frowned. Then why'd he hurt her? And I gave him the truest answer I had. Because some people confuse loving somebody with owning them. He thought about that, serious as a judge, and then he nodded the way kids do when they understand more than we expect. I handed him the rod. You want to know what real strength is? What? Making people feel safe when they're around you. He caught a perch the size of my hand 15 minutes later and grinned like he'd landed a whale. Early that summer, Megan came by with an envelope. No return address, but I knew the prison stamp. Brandon. She sat beside me while I opened it. The letter was handwritten and messy, and it surprised me. No excuses, no self-pity. Just honesty about his drinking, his insecurity, his need to control, his shame. One line stayed with me. I spent years trying to feel powerful by making other people smaller, and that told me the rehabilitation might actually be doing something. Because that's the whole engine of it. Isn't it a man so hollow inside that the only way he could feel tall was to stand on someone gentler than himself? It doesn't excuse a thing he did. But understanding the machine is how you make sure you never build one. What do you think? Megan asked. I folded the letter. I think real remorse hurts. That's how you know it's real. Do you forgive him? That question sat heavy between us. At my age, I've learned forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a decision you make over and over, some days more than once. I don't know yet, I admitted. She nodded. That's fair. Then, after a long quiet, she said the thing that nearly brought the tears up. But thank you for saving me. And I looked at my daughter, healthier, stronger, still healing, and I realized I hadn't saved her alone. She saved herself the moment she found the courage to send that text. Plenty of people never do. A few Sundays after that, the whole family gathered at my place. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, cornbread, the kind of meal Helen used to make when the money was thin but the love wasn't. Sun poured through the kitchen. Eli laughed at something on the television. Megan looked for the first time in years genuinely at peace. Not the brave face kind, the real kind. And sitting at that old table with the dishes clattering and my family's voices filling the house again, I finally understood something it took me nearly 70 years to learn. When I was young, I thought strength meant winning the fight. Then war taught me strength meant surviving the pain. But growing old taught me the real one strength is answering the phone when someone is afraid. It's staying calm when rage would be so much easier. It's protecting the people you love without losing your own soul in the process. And sometimes the hardest kind, it's letting yourself heal too. So before I let you go, I want to ask you something, because I've been carrying this story a long time and I'd rather not carry it alone. If you think I did the right thing walking into that kitchen the way I did, comment a 1. If you think I should have waited outside for the deputies like Dispatch told me, comment a 2. And if you're somewhere in between, if you understand it but you're not sure you could have done it, comment a 3. There's no wrong answer. I just want to know how you see it. And tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is there right now, because it amazes me to think of all the different kitchens and porches and late-night drives this little story might be reaching. And if you've ever loved someone through a thing like this, if you've ever sat across a table from somebody who was quietly disappearing, or if you were once that person yourself, I hope you'll say so in the comments, because somebody scrolling tonight needs to know they aren't the only one. Here's the one thing I'll ask you to actually do, today, not someday. Call the person you love who's gone a little quiet lately, not to fix anything, just so they know the line is open, no questions asked. And here's the question I'll leave you to sit with tonight. Is there someone in your life slowly getting smaller, right in front of you, And have you been telling yourself it isn't your place to say so? If this meant something to you, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe and stay a while. I'm just an old man telling true feeling stories about family and second chances, and the kind of strength nobody hands you a medal for. There's a chair at this table for you anytime you want it. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Astoria, Oregon to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental.